Ready or not, it is 2025. Happy New Year. It has been a while since our last episode, but back in December, I talked about how making small changes can significantly impact your trajectory. And I want to continue with this way of thinking today, but with the additional challenge of getting into action. We often get stuck in our heads trying to decide what needs to change, the best way to do it. And I include myself here. But until you actually put things into action, you will not see any change. So it's 2025, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's get moving. I don't know about you, but 2024 was hard for me. I felt like it was one emotionally draining challenge after the other. And those challenges impacted quite a few things, including my episodes of this podcast. And my intention was and is to do an episode every other week. But I know that last year I wasn't always able to hit that mark. I definitely didn't accomplish everything I wanted to last year. And that often got me thinking about what I lacked, what needed to change, and what wasn't working. And I thought about that a lot. And quite frankly, was a bummer. And it also kept me stuck. Yes, it is important to identify what's not working, but mostly I already knew those things. And the new challenges were reminders of the things I already knew weren't working. And that reminded me of how I'd failed to do anything about them. Again, it was a rough year for me. I really got down on myself for not having acted when I first realized there was a problem. I blamed myself for the current challenges and thought, if I had only done something before when I knew there was a problem, I wouldn't even be facing this current challenge. The problem with that, of course, is that it kept me stuck in the past. I couldn't go back and do things differently. And I found myself thinking about my perceived failures and honestly, my lack of perfection. And this was an old wound from childhood. And once I locked into that pattern again, it was very difficult to get out. And in fact, I'm still wrestling with it. And that's when the universe helped me out a little bit and gave me the inspiration to do exactly what I talked about in my last episode, to make those small, gradual steps in a few areas to change the road I was on. Some of those changes were still very challenging to make. But once I let go of the idea that I had to get everything exactly right to succeed, things became easier. Now, if you've been listening for a while, you know that I've been talking about this for quite a while. Hey guys, remember, it's not about big changes. It's about upgrading your habits, challenging your stories, and developing the skills you need to be successful with fill in the blank. And honestly, I was embarrassed that I hadn't put into action the very things I'd been telling you forever, which made me feel like even more of a failure. But I think we all run into situations like this. We know better about XYZ. And in fact, we probably even tell other people, maybe it's students, maybe it's our children, maybe it's other team members, that they should be doing the things we know we should be doing, but we don't do it. One of Maya Angelou's quotes, one of her famous quotes is, do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. And that is a lovely sentiment. And it's certainly true to a certain point. You can't possibly do better until you know better. And it's our conscious mind that takes in that new knowledge and assesses whether or not this way, this information would help us do better. But unfortunately, we are stuck in autopilot 95% of the time. So most of our doing is driven by our subconscious, that autopilot. And so often we defer to past thought patterns and behaviors because that's just how our brain is set up. And that's a sticky situation. But we don't have to stay stuck. In order to move forward, we actually have to move. Thinking, reflecting, planning, those things alone don't get us anywhere. We have to act. We have to get moving. And again, we don't do this through giant disruptive actions and huge shifts, but by small, incremental changes, those small shifts. Go big or go home doesn't work, given how our brains are designed. And again, I have mentioned this before, and I even truly believe it. But in the moment, when I was having those feelings, when I was in some of those old patterns, I didn't believe it. Again, that's why understanding our stories are so important. But my challenge for you, and honestly myself in 2025, is to get moving. What are you going to do to make your life better? What are you going to do to be a better supervisor? What are you going to do to better manage your stress? What are you going to do to get yourself moving? And let's start with this podcast. Why do you listen to My Circus, My Monkeys? Other than my delightful and witty banter and personality. I know many of you, the overarching reason is because you want to be a better supervisor. Okay, great, check. Hopefully you have found this podcast to be informative, thought-provoking, and empowering. It's certainly my intention. I mean, if it wasn't, you probably wouldn't keep listening, right? So if you are listening to be a better supervisor, my next question is, what have you actually taken from these episodes and put into action, put into practice to become a better supervisor? Now, I absolutely listen to podcasts, read books, listen to books, and think, yes, that is awesome. I'm going to do that. It's going to change my life. But 9 times out of 10, never quite happens. So I'm not asking this question. I'm not asking you to think about what you've put into action from this podcast to make you feel bad about it or to shame you. Because again, knowing better isn't enough. I'm asking you the question to challenge you to start putting things into action. As you were reflecting on 2024, what came up for you? And I should add, what came up for you again? Because often these things aren't new. What came up as something that needs to change or improve? You probably don't have to think very hard about it, right? When I asked the question, something popped into your head. And maybe that thing feels huge, which makes it really tempting to go back in, think about something that maybe is a little bit smaller and that feels perhaps more manageable. But remember, you don't have to change everything about how you handle those situations. You just have to do something different. You have to make a small shift in how you show up in that arena. So, what's one thing you can do now? And if you're driving, maybe not literally right now, but one thing you can do today that will change your trajectory with that thing in that area. Something pop into your head for you? Did that thing you can do today still feel too big? If so, how can you break that thing down into smaller chunks? Is there perhaps a story that you're telling yourself that's getting in the way of taking action? Again, for me, well, if I can't do it perfectly, what's the point of doing it at all? What is your story? If it is a story, then maybe the one thing you can do right now is to break that story down and create an alternative story that's going to empower you to take action. That's going to change your thinking so that you can get into action. And as you're thinking about how to get moving in 2025, I have another question. What does your team look like? Now, I'm not talking about your staff, your employees, although some of them may be on this list. What I'm really talking about are who are the people that are in your corner who give you the support, encouragement, and perhaps nudge you when you need to move forward. Those small shifts that I made at the end of last year weren't just because I suddenly had the willpower to do it. It's not suddenly because, yes, after thinking and thinking and thinking for months, something clicked. I have a team of people, some paid, some pro bono, who love and support me. And when I'm facing challenges, they listen, they empathize, they help me think differently, and sometimes they give me the little kick that I need to get moving. I used to think, again, story, that I should just do it all myself. And again, that I should be able to do that. I mean, we should be self-sufficient and never have to rely on others, right? That's certainly what I was taught to believe. Or at least if I wasn't directly taught, that's what I absorbed from our culture. But we are social creatures and we need other people to self-regulate. When we get stuck in our heads, we're just hearing the same information and messages over and over again. And again, filtered through those stories. So until we find the folks who are on our team and can help us interpret and regulate those messages, we are going to stay stuck. I know I certainly felt stuck until I started reaching out and building that team. So, who is on your team? And if you can't think of anyone or many people, then perhaps step one is assembling your team. Do you need a coach? Do you need a therapist? Do you need friends or more friends or a certain kind of friends? Maybe family members that have been there, but you haven't really thought to reach out to? Who can help you move forward and support you in your journey? Those are the folks who can help you look at things differently, encourage you, and challenge you when you need that push. I do this podcast because I want to be on your team. I want to help you take the steps you need to get the life you want. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, first of all, thank you. I'm so glad that you have found this beneficial and, again, hopefully empowering. But second, if you've been listening but not acting on what you've heard, perhaps it's time to invest in another level of support from Strengths University. What would help you put what you've learned into action? Maybe some individual coaching, maybe a workshop or some ongoing group coaching. Or maybe it's time you invested in the Supervisor Strengths Institute. Our spring cohort starts on Wednesday, January 22nd. And if you've enjoyed / found beneficial many of the things we've talked about on the podcast, the Institute is a great way to go deeper into those topics and, even more importantly, focus on implementation. That's getting into action and getting moving. Now, we cover quite a bit during 8 weeks of the Institute, but we always encourage you to break it down and start with small changes that are going to help you accomplish your long-term goals as a supervisor and a human being. And a great way to double down on this concept of both building your team and investing in yourself, getting into action, is to invite one of those people who is or potentially could be on your team to join you in going through the Institute. You can both support each other as you work towards those goals and putting things into place to actually act on what you're learning. So, whatever changes you want and know you need to make can only happen when you upgrade your thoughts and behaviors. That means changing how you think about the situation or problem and then acting in a different way. That is going to be challenging, again, because your subconscious brain wants things to stay exactly how they are, parentheses, because then it can predict what's going to happen, even if what's going to happen, your conscious brain realizes is not the best thing. That is why you need to work with your brain to get into action through those small shifts and surround yourself with people who have your back along the way. You can do this even if you don't feel like you can. I didn't think I could make some of the shifts that I did last year, but I did it with the help and support of the people around me. Now, I'm not 100% where I want to be, but I'm closer now than I was before. And you can get closer too. It's 2005, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's get moving.